following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back talking sports in the zone. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I've got four mavens with me. Alan Blumkin, how are you, sir?
Hello there, everybody.
Good. George Case III.
Good evening.
David Hubler.
Hello, hello.
Good evening, sir. And Hal Bock. How are you?
Hi,
Hal?
everybody.
Good. Going to have George start off and lead you guys. We're going to start off talking about congratulating everyone but the Montreal Expos. Take it away, George Case.
Well, yeah, Ralph, thank you. It is a significant. David and I have been pretty excited, and rightly so. David is in the Washington area, and the city is just on fire with regard to the Nationals. A great victory in the World Series. To be honest with you, very surprising to me. I don't recall a World Series. Maybe there have been, but I don't recall a World Series where the home team lost every game.
Never.
They said never happened before.
Never happened.
Yeah, I mean,
it
was really it was amazing to me because when the series went back to Houston, I thought for sure Houston was going to win one of those two and we're going to be the champions. But destiny prevailed, and the Washington Ball Club pulled it out. Tremendous hitting combined with excellent pitching. And for me personally, I was, very, very happy because of the years that my dad had played in Washington. But the fact is that the Washington fans were so long suffering. The World Series, the only World Series championship in Washington, D.C. history was 1924. And David, you might want to talk a little bit about that. I mean, my dad played for Bucky Harris and Ozzie Bluege, who were two of the players on that team. Bucky Harris was called the Boy Wonder, and that was a long time between 1924 and 2019. I think if my math is correct, it's 95 years.
Yes,
which is
yes.
just amazing.
That puts it up in the category with the Cubs and the Red Sox.
The White Sox, yeah.
Right.
And the White Sox, too, yeah. It's interesting you mentioned Ozzie Bluege, because Bluege was managing Washington during the war, and he got him into second place twice, which was about as high as they got, up until basically this year. If I'm correct, I don't recall them finishing second any time under Ted Williams or Gil Hodges.
Well, David, you bring up a good point. That's absolutely true. Bucky Harris managed the ball club until 42, and then Ozzie took over in 43 and did lead Washington to two second-place finishes. The 43 finish was a distant second, but the 45 finish was a game and a half that was decided on the last day of the regular season. Right. Washington had finished a week early, and they had to sit around and listen to the ball game on the clubhouse radio. And ninth inning grand slam home run, Hank Greenberg, and that clinched the 45 title for the Tigers.
George, didn't they finish a week early because Griffith had rented the stadium out to the Redskins?
Yes, absolutely true, Alan. He did, because Washington had finished the 44 season in last place, and nobody expected them to be in the pennant race. And, we've talked before, Mr. Griffith, he was a businessman, and he felt that he could, make some extra money. And the fact is that the Redskins needed Griffith Stadium, and he did. He leased out Griffith Stadium a week ahead of time, and the Redskins had started their season. So it was
also what he did
crazy.
What he also did was he doubled up on the double headers.
They
the
sure
whole
did.
Month of September, figuring that they'd be out of the actions by that time, long out of it, and he just played these double headers. So yeah, and the players were just exhausted.
The only time
that you're right, David, and I think some of the players, I never heard my dad talk about it specifically, but some of the players, obviously the pitching staff had to be worn down completely when you're playing that amount of doubleheaders and playing in wool flannel uniforms and basically during the day. And one interesting fact, and you guys might have heard this and maybe not, but on the last day of the season, Washington was playing a doubleheader against the Philadelphia A's. And George Binks lost the ball in the sun. He was a Washington outfielder. Lost the ball in the sun because he forgot his sunglasses. And that game went to the A's. And if Washington had won, they would have tied with the Tigers. But the fact is that they only split the doubleheader, and that give Detroit that opportunity the last 1 week later when Hank Greenberg clinched it for the Tigers. So my dad had never spoken against George Binks, but he told me several times, he said, that doggone Binks, he said, if he only had his glasses, we might have been in there.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys a question. Is there an analytics formula for lost sunglasses? I haven't come across it yet.
Not yet.
Hey, Hal, I haven't heard about it, but maybe
Not
there
yet.
is somewhere.
Not
They'll
yet.
probably come up with one.
Yeah. The only other time I've heard anything like that was, I'm going back to ancient history. I read this a bunch of years ago. In 1904, the Highlanders, the Yankees, were locked in with Boston in a tremendous pennant race, and they shifted a doubleheader from Hilltop Park up to Boston at the end of the season because the Highlanders had rented Hilltop Park out to Columbia University for a football game, and the Boston won 2 games that was transferred. But
that's amazing. That's amazing now, and that's a story I've never heard. I never.
Yeah, but something like that could never happen these days.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
Columbia has Baker Field already ready.
Oh,
ready to
go. The powerhouse. Yeah.
Yeah, the powerhouse. Exactly. Yeah. You talk about a losing team. Wow.
But since 1924, the old Senators were only in 2 more. In 1925, when they blew a 3-1 lead against the Pirates, and 1933, that was it.
Yeah, so that's how you get that. That's how you get that.
At that time, as David knows, and Alan and Hal and Ralph, Washington was the American League power during those years. I mean, the A's, the Yankees, and the Senators. It's hard to believe, but Washington was right up there, and the 29. 31 A's were considered by many to be every bit as strong as the 27 Yankees. So
here's a bit of trivia. The only player to play in all 5 series from 1921 to 1931, not involved in the Yankees or the A's, was Goose Goslin. He played for the 3 in Washington, and then after 33, he went to Detroit and played in the 2 there.
Right. No, that's interesting, Alan. I wasn't aware of that. And, my dad and Goose were teammates in 38. And in 1989, my dad and Goose Goslin were both inducted together into the D.C. Hall of Stars. So I had a chance to meet Goose Goslin's brother, Jim, who accepted the award for Goose. And I told him at the time, I said, Jim, I can't believe the resemblance between you and Goose. I mean, it was just incredible. But it was an honor for me to accept the award from my dad, and knowing that Goose and my dad had actually been teammates.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Guys, you guys mentioned the 1924 championship. The Senators won that championship largely because of a pebble on the third base line. A ball hit a pebble, bounced over Freddie Lindstrom's shoulder, and that was the turning point in the last game of the 1933 World Series. I don't know that
24. Hal, and not quite.
I don't know that analytics has come up with a formula for pebbles yet either.
Yeah, before that, the giant catcher had stepped into his mask on a foul ball.
Hank Gowdy.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank God, and it kept the inning alive.
I know.
See that happening too much anymore.
Mr. Griffith,
What baseball's all about,
I
gentlemen.
know. Yeah,
It's
Yes.
unpredictable.
I know.
Clark
Yeah.
Griffith commented. He said, somebody upstairs must have been looking out for us, and to have the mass situation and then the pebble bounce over Lindstrom's head. I mean, it was incredible. And the other part of it that was amazing is that Walter Johnson, the great Walter Johnson, had lost 2 of those first 6 games in the World Series. Clark Griffith brought him in relief, and he was actually the winning pitcher for that 7th game when the pebble went over Lindstrom's head, and Muddy Rule, who was Walter Johnson's favorite catcher, Muddy Rule scored the winning run.
Yeah, the other little piece of trivia I want to give you guys is that Bucky Harris has the longest gap between world champions because he also managed the 1947 Yankees.
Right.
And there's a 23-year gap between his winning World Series, which is the largest in baseball history.
No, that's a good point, Alan. And Bucky Harris, my dad always considered him to be one of the best managers in baseball, but he did have that very long gap between 24 and 47. And, I was fortunate because my dad and I both went up to Cooperstown in 75 when Judge Stanley Harris, Bucky's oldest son, accepted the award for his father because Bucky was quite ill at the time and couldn't make the ceremony. So, I was excited. That was my first trip to the Hall of Fame, and it was quite an event at the time.
Well, I read about Bucky Harris that he managed the Phillies, started to manage them in 1943, and he was fired by the owner, who was later kicked out for gambling. And
right.
There was almost a revolt in the clubhouse when Bucky was fired.
Well, Bucky, I can tell you, Bucky was loved by a lot of the players. They always considered him a player's manager because he played the game himself. He knew baseball. He knew how to handle people, and he was, he was not a fire and brimstone guy. He was, very thoughtful. But Bucky and my dad were very, very good friends, and I know my father was really honored when Stanley Harris, Bucky's son, asked my dad personally to come up to Cooperstown for the ceremony.
Wow. Wow.
And one other thing I wanted to mention, you guys, about Bucky, is that the fact is that from what I read, I didn't know it at the time, but what I read, Bucky in his youth had worked in the coal mines.
Oh, really?
And, with baseball was his way out of the coal mines, which is what a lot of players, whether it be in the farm or whether they be working in coal mines or working in menial type jobs, if they had a skill in baseball, that a lot of times that was their way out, and Bucky was a prime example of that.
Well, the first thing that when George Weiss took over as general manager of the Yankees after 1948, he first thing he did was fire Bucky Harris because he thought he was too soft on the players, and like typical general managers, they wanted to bring in their own managers, so he brought in Stengel.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was strictly because he was not. Bucky was not the wisest choice. So even back in those days, it went like that.
Yeah, well, Stengel.
Let's get up to the Nationals. We're forgetting all about
David.
that.
I just wanted to ask you, David.
Yeah.
Did you go to the parade? I saw some footage of it. I mean, it looked like it was an amazing turnout.
It was a huge turnout, of course, because they have with the exception of the Caps, they don't win Washington doesn't take home too many championship trophies, not lately. So that was another huge event in Washington because the Caps the Caps had a similar reputation or history as the Nats did. They'd get into the playoff and they'd lose right away. The first round, boom, they were out.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times the Caps did that, and then they finally won. The Nats too. They got into the playoffs a few times. I think one year they lost in the play-in round, and then after that they would wind up losing in the division series. And of course, after the start they had this year, a lot of people wrote them off very early. And it's interesting too because a lot of people around here still think Dusty Baker was really a terrific manager for them, and they got rid of him because he wasn't a technician. He wasn't a statistics guy.
He couldn't get anybody out of the playoffs really. I mean, the guy had lost his last 9 playoff series.
Yeah, David and Alan and Hal and Ralph, I'm curious. David, what was the reaction? I mean, you talk about Dusty Baker and they fired him and everybody was, up in arms. But Martinez apparently came in and did such a good job, and he seems to be the darling of everybody right now.
Yes, he is, of course.
But there were rumors that he was going to be fired when they had that 19-31 start.
Right.
There were rumors that he and Rizzo were going to be let go. But
the
press in the middle of the season. It's awfully tough to change managers in the middle of the season.
Oh yeah,
I think. And
it's a desperation move. Yeah, it's a desperation move. But the press, what little there is here in terms of, it's not like New York where you've got three newspapers. Or one time, as Hal knows, we had 7, and all getting down on the team and the manager and the general manager. They turned on him too fairly early on, especially as you say that 19-31 crossroads, so to speak. But as they slowly turned it around and slowly even the press began to come around slowly. They weren't as vicious as some of the New York writers have been, or certainly the Boston writers. But there was a falling off there. But I think they're going to. It depends on what they're going to do about re-signing, Strasburg. If they're going to give him another extension on his contract, and what they're going to do with Zimmerman. I think Zimmerman will get an extension the way they gave CC Sabathia an extra year. Because he's sort of the picture, the face of the team, the original Nat, and I think they'll probably do that.
What about Rondon?
That's the good question. Rondon will probably opt for free agency. I can't see him not. He's got to see what kind of money is out there. The Nats are not known as a big spender. They've spent bucks on a couple of ball players, but they did.
David, from what I understand, the situation with Strasburg and Rondon is that the offer that they gave Rondon during the season was a lot of deferred money, and the contract that Strasburg is in now is a lot of deferred money.
Well, sure, that's how they do it.
Strasburg has opted out. Strasburg opted out. So, he's a free agent, which I thought was kind of ironic, because he did it before the team visited the White House. And here we are celebrating with my teammates, and what a wonderful season, and we're champions. But meanwhile, I opted out of the contract. I thought that was kind of ironic.
But the guys today, they don't think anything of it. You see them in the press. Oh, well, he deserves to see how much money he can make out there.
Well,
that's the mentality.
Garrett Cole didn't even wait till wait till the 7th game was over before announcing that he's not an employee of the Astros anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's why that December meeting is going to be very interesting, and leading up to it, what's going to happen now with all of the free agencies and opting out. There's going to be a lot of money floating around. I think the Yankees are going to be a play this year because they.
Well, Yankees declined to.
Odd thing this week. The Yankees did a very odd thing this week. D.D. Gregorius, who succeeded Derek Jeter at shortstop, and has been a pretty consistently good player until this season. He had Tommy John surgery in the off season and did not ever really come around this season. They didn't even offer him a qualifying offer. Now, if you offer the qualifying offer, which was $17.5, and the player does not signs it with another team, you get a draft choice.
Right.
But they didn't do that, and so he's free. He's a free agent, free to sign with anybody, and there's no compensation for the Yankees. I thought that was very unusual. Were they afraid that he would sign a $17 million contract? Maybe. Maybe they think he can get him to sign for less. I don't know. But
I always signed for less.
I didn't see that. That is interesting.
Chapman had an Chapman had an opt-out clause, and he decided to stay. And the shock, J.D. Martinez with Boston had an opt-out clause, and he decided to stay. Everybody figured he was gone. But us old-timers, we hate opt-out clauses. Kershaw did that last year with the Dodgers, and they gave him 3 more years at with a raise.
The Washington Nationals are the champions of baseball. No question about that. But I want to ask you guys what you thought of the 7th inning of the 7th game. Now, Zach Greinke was working on a one-hitter through 6 innings, and Rendon opened the 7th with a home run. No surprise there because of the kind of player he is and the kind of season he had. And then Greinke walked Soto. So now the first 2 batters in the 7th inning, 1 hit a home run, 1 got a base on balls. It's now a 2-1 game. The manager comes out and Greinke is gone. Now, I want to ask you, do you think if Bob Gibson were on the mound, he would have come out of that game in the 7th inning? No. He never would have come out of that game.
If he was pitching in this, if he
was
pitching in this era, yes, that's just what they do. They pull these guys. I mean, you could be working on a no-hit, on a perfect game. Who was pitched? Somebody was into the 7th inning, and they were pitching a no-hitter, and it was pulled out of the game. It happened this year.
I saw
about baseball.
This is not new.
I don't understand about baseball that allows a manager to take out a guy who's pitched 1 hit ball through 6 innings,
right.
and all of a sudden he's gone.
I've seen games where pitchers take a no-hitter into the 8th and 9th inning, and somebody gets a hit, and they pull him right away after that. But basically, one of the things I think that a World Series, the longer it goes, the more it exposes team strengths and team weaknesses. And one of the big weaknesses the Astros showed in this series was the bullpen.
He had Garrett
So
Cole
once they got these starters out, the bullpen was inadequate.
In baseball, warming up.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you got the best pitcher in baseball and you're determined to take out a guy who's throwing a one-hitter through 6 innings, bring in the best pitcher in baseball. Yeah. Don't bring in some rag arm. I mean, that's ridiculous.
No, I agree with you, Hal. I agree with you. That's the strategy, that you get a lot of times in a World Series. They're using starters and relievers, their best pitchers. That's what they're doing. They're not, in the old days, they weren't governed by these crazy pitch counts. I mean,
in 2001, after Arizona, 7th game after Arizona pulled Schilling, they brought Randy Johnson in.
Yep.
Of course.
Right.
Why not? You're going for the championship.
Yeah, you pull all stops out. If it's 7th game, it's everybody on deck, as they say.
Well, no, it's true. I mean, that's why I brought up earlier, and going back into history with that 24 series, that's what Bucky Harris did. He brought Walter Johnson in relief.
Yeah,
and there was no question he was going with the best, and they said, hey, if they beat the best, then they deserved to win. But on the other hand, he wasn't going to fool around with some rag arm reliever. He wanted to bring in the best arm he had on the ball.
Sure. As they say, they have all winter to rest.
That's right.
Yeah, and Hinch brought in this reliever, Harris, who he said the night before was tired.
Right.
They're tired. He brings him in and gives up the home run right away.
Well, you know what, guys? I mean, when I was watching the series, and I guess it's the way they do it now, but every graphic they're putting the pitch counts that these guys have, and I'm looking at it and saying, Jesus Christ, are you going to determine whether your pitcher is gone, or instead of going out there and say, hey, how you doing? How you feeling? If a guy says he's tired, he's going to tell the manager. If he says, hey, I still got it, they ask the catcher says, hey, he's got good location, he's got good velocity, whatever it is, keep him in there. Don't be governed by, okay, he's up to 98 pitches now, we got to take him out of the ball game.
Good.
Frankie only threw 80 pitches in that game.
Yeah.
They pulled him. Yeah.
Yep.
If I'm Greinke, and if I have any kind of intestinal fortitude, I say to the manager, I'm finishing. I'm out here. I'm getting these guys out. Leave me alone.
Right.
But he couldn't get off the mound quick enough,
Yeah, there's no Spawns out there, or Robin Robertses, or Gibsons, or Severs, or Palmers,
No, there's
or any of these early win way back. Any of these types that would tell the manager to stick the ball up his ass. They weren't coming out. Koufax, Marichal, yeah.
Well, you're talking about, Washington. I'm going to go back to the expansion senators and just tell you a story about Tom Chaney, who pitched that 15-inning game and struck out 21 or whatever it is. Mickey Vernon, Sid Hudson wanted to take him out of the game. And Chaney told them when they came to the mound, he said, I want to finish what I started. That's the mentality that they had back then. And that's the way pitching was. Those guys, I agree with all you guys. If a manager went out and to take out Gibson or Drysdale or Spahn or any of those guys, he'd have found himself, looking like a jerk because he'd have gone right back in because they just said, hey, I'm not coming out of the game. That's what you pay me to do.
It's
the story of
the World Series.
Right.
There is no game tomorrow.
I know, yeah.
This is it, pal.
Well, Max Scherzer would have told him off. Scherzer was is a gamer like that. Yeah,
that's an excellent point, David. Scherzer pitched in trouble throughout the first 5 innings of that game. Mm-hmm. There were runners everywhere, but that guy's got some guts, and he reached down and kind of into his reservoir and came up with pitches to get out of those spots. The Houston Astros left 9 men on base?
Yeah.
I mean, they had every opportunity to win that game. And Scherzer wasn't going to let them. I give him all the credit in the world.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely. David, I wanted to ask you because I wasn't following the ball club at the beginning. Obviously, I was at the end because I was very interested. But when they did the turnaround, did they change the lineup or make any changes that you recall to really turn that team around?
Nothing spectacular. He was juggling the batting order pretty much constantly, because Zimmerman was out for that part, and I forget a couple of other players were not there. But like Michael A. What's his Michael A.
Michael A. Taylor.
Taylor, right? He didn't even make the squad coming out of Florida. He was down but no, he changed the batting order, but nothing spectacular that grabbed the front pages of the sports section. He just actually, to his credit, he plowed along. He kept saying, "Well, we'll win tomorrow. We'll get this going." He was Mr. Optimism for the whole year. He put on a good face for the press. Apparently, he was really, very up in the clubhouse, and he just might win Manager of the Year.
I have another question for you guys. In Game 6 of the World Series, there was a play at first base where the umpire called a runner out for runner's interference, called Trey Turner out.
That was terrible.
Martinez went nuts.
That was a terrible call.
He jumped out on the field. Two of his coaches had to hold him away from the umpires. They didn't succeed. He got into the umpire's face. Do you think he should be suspended?
No.
No, I don't.
That was awful. It was the same place as J.C. Martin. It was the same place that J.C. Martin had the 1969 series, and it was that call was absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it's the heat of the moment, and I think, hey, if you're going to eject them, that's one thing, but not suspend them.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll tell you what, I've been around baseball all my life. That's a call I've never seen. I don't know when I was playing.
Game.
I mean, we would run down the line. We didn't think about whether you're going to have interfere or whatever. I mean, I felt justified in that Martinez, if he was going to get ejected, he had every right to bitterly complain about that call.
But the show that he put on, I think, warrants a suspension. Not for the 7th game of the World Series, but maybe for the start of next season, maybe for 2 or 3 games, I would think.
It's possible, Hal. I don't know, what he was ejected, whether he was ejected for something he said. I didn't see him. I didn't see him touch.
Are.
Yeah, I didn't see him touch the umpire, which is the cause of automatic ejection and sometimes suspension. I didn't see that, but I think personally he was justified, certainly in arguing the call. Now, whether or not he's going to be suspended to start the season, but to me, everything's on the line in that kind of situation, and that's a judgment call, and you've got every right to argue.
Did he have a reputation of getting thrown out, or no? Because
no.
Okay, so there's no Earl Weaver or Billy Martin or any. It wasn't any of these types.
No.
So if he's very rare, because Jim Leland, when he was managing the Pirates, really, when he came out, they listened to him because he was very polite and really got thrown out of a game. If his reputation is not, an Earl Weaver type or a Billy Martin type, he may get by.
Right.
Well, I just think it's the World Series. It's the showpiece of the game, and the act that he put on was over the top. And I don't think that he should not be punished. I think he has to be punished at some level at some point. Now, It's difficult now. Right now, you're not going to suspend him now for the start of next season. But I think that Joe Torre should have made an announcement that his act warranted a suspension. We're not going to suspend him for the 7th game of the World Series. That would be unfair to him and to his team.
Right.
But he's going to have to pay a hefty fine and be suspended for a game or 2 at the beginning of next season.
Well, Greinke stood around on the mound, without warming up during that whole thing.
Yeah,
it reminded me of 1974 with the A's and the Dodgers, where something happened in the outfield. They took them 10 minutes to resume. Mike Marshall was standing on the mound for the Dodgers, didn't throw a warm-up. The game resumes in the first pitch. Joe Rudy hits a home run off him. I don't know if you guys remember that one, but that was the precedent to this.
Well, I just think that something has to be done when a guy puts on a show like that. And, it's one thing to argue with the umpires. We've seen it all the time in baseball.
Right.
But that was over the top, I thought. I thought Martinez was over the top.
Did he say any curse words?
It's a game of the World Series, and it's a key call. But at some level, you got to keep a lid on it,
Yeah.
Does he use any curse words?
It's a good point, Hal. It's a good point. I just don't know. I think you're right, though. If you're going to do it, do it at the time and say you're going to make the announcement or whatever.
You're right. You can't do it now.
If you wait until April of next year, nobody will even think anything about it. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Right.
No, you can't do that.
Right.
Remember when the Bert Campaneris in 1972 and the LCS threw a bat at the Tiger pitcher, and he got suspended, but they didn't do the suspension until the beginning of 1973.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Whatever happened? Speaking about that kind of stuff, whatever happened with Roseboro and what's his name?
Marichal.
When he went, yeah, Marichal.
Marichal got suspended for 8 days and fined about $2,000, which in those days
what it was? Okay.
Was huge money. But they became very, very good friends, believe it or not, after several years after the incident.
Yeah, I had read that, Alan. I think you're
Yeah.
right. I had read that they had become very good friends. But, I mean, that was very blatant. I mean, at the time when that happened, I mean, the pictures and all, I mean, Marichal and Roseboro, they're really going at it, and the bat is up in the air, and, I mean, who knows what was going to happen.
There's an incident in 1958 where the Giants were playing the Pirates in Forbes Field, and there was something went on, and Cepeda Cepeda, who was a rookie, ran out of the dugout with a bat in his hands, threatening to smash people, and Willie Mays tackled him to prevent him from going out there, because he said that if he had gone out there and done what he done, he might have been kicked out altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. If you've ever played baseball, I mean, the tempers, you go crazy at the moment, and then you calm down. But it is something that managers will fight. They'll argue. I mean, that episode with Earl Weaver and that umpire, I mean, that's a classic.
Bill Haller.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't stop. He just kept going back for more.
That's on YouTube. That's on YouTube. Yeah. Earl was a piece of work.
Weaver told the umpire, "I'm going to the Hall of Fame," and the umpire, Bill Haller, said to him, "What, for losing a World Series?" He used more colorful language than that, but.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, we have fun. We have fun talking about this, and we started really, the conversation about the excitement in Washington, and I just wanted to wrap it up by saying, personally, I mean, it was a thrill for me to be watching that, and people have congratulated me. I said, hey, I didn't do anything, but I certainly had my heart with the Nationals, even though when my dad was playing, Washington was American League City. All of a sudden, Washington is now a National League city, but they're the world champions.
Yeah, we'll see how, it's tough to win a World Series. It's even harder to win again the next year. So as most current champions can attest.
No, now you have to go through 3 rounds. Until the expansion in 1969, the winners went there, so he had to, only had to win the one round.
Right.
It's funny because when I started following in 1951, the old Washington Senators were pretty bad for most of the time. I imagine they didn't draw too well.
Right.
And neither did the expansion Senators, because they were pretty bad most of the time. But this team, the ballpark was packed every day. I mean, there's a real hunger for this. Yeah,
well, there was. Alan, yeah, you're right about that. The players on the Nationals, I mean, they were stocked with a very good team. When my dad was playing, they didn't have that kind of roster, and then they developed. Later in the 50s and into the 1960 season, Washington became a real home run hitting powerhouse.
And then they went to Minnesota.
And then they go to Minnesota. Yeah. So then all of a sudden now the poor Washington fans, my dad and Mickey Vernon and Sid Hudson, they were excited to be back in Washington, but they knew they were very limited what they could produce on the field. And so here are the fans who used to seeing Harmon Killebrew and Jim Lemon and Bob Allison and Pasquale and Ramos, those guys, and all of a sudden, here you got the expansion Senators, and everybody's looking out and said, who are these guys? But they represented Washington as best they could, but they certainly didn't have the talent on the field. And to compare the expansion Senators and then what became, Ted Williams, and they had one good year, But the ball club
short-wrecked the team with the Denny McLean trade. Short-wrecked that team.
Right. That whole thing went down the toilet.
Yeah.
And but the Nationals today, and David, what you've watched during the season, and I watched the last couple months of the season with great interest. I mean, they had an outstanding baseball team.
It also helps with the Redskins stink.
There's no question about that.
Yeah. Also helps with the Redskins stink. So that made it even more attractive to the Washington fans.
Right. Well, I can tell you the long-suffering Washington fans, believe me, I know. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad was retired, and I used to, bemoan the fact that they were losing, and all of a sudden they started to win, and they're gone. And you can imagine if you're a fan in Washington D.C. and you're used to going and watching the original Senators in those last couple of years, and all of a sudden you got to look at that expansion team, and it's like night and day. It's just a very, very difficult situation for baseball fans in Washington. And then all of a sudden, Bob Short, after the 71 season, pulls the rug out from under him and moves the team to Texas. And now they went for, 30-some years without Major League Baseball in our nation's capital.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. You guys went through that, the White Sox, the Red Sox, the Cubs, and one of the things that really infuriated me in 1969, which was their eighth year of existence, how the Met fans, went through absolute hell. Yeah.
Right.
Well, don't forget
long-suffering Met fans. 8 years is not long-suffering.
But it's 100 games a year. That's 800 games.
Yeah.
That's a lot of games to lose.
Yeah, but there's still a length of time. I mean, it's just...
Right.
No, I understand that, but if you're a zealot, if you're a real fan, you're on the game day in and day out, and they lost 800 games in those 8 years.
Yeah, there's also there was a book that came out after the 2004 with the Red Sox, and some writer wrote a book, Now I Can Die in Peace. I mean...
Well, it is amazing when you look at it. I mean, the Miracle Mets and what they did in '69, and now with what the Nationals have done in 2019. I mean, it's come full cycle, and there you have a great story about the Mets going from the first year, can anybody here play this game, according to Casey Stengel, and now you've got a team like the Nationals. They're very solid. And going out and becoming world champions by winning, 4 games on the road in the World Series. That's just unprecedented.
And winning 5 elimination games.
Right.
Well, they won 7 in a row at one point in the playoffs.
Well, the only easy series they had was with the Cardinals.
Well, 4 straight. It can't be easy. I mean,
I'm saying in comparison to what they did with the Dodgers and what they did with the Astros.
But a little side note to that interesting little bit of trivia. Not only did the home team lose all its games, but we're talking about the Astros. But the Nats also lost all of their home games, too.
Yeah, everybody lost the home games in that series.
Absolutely.
Never happened before.
Right. No, because if you've ever played the game or played any game, I mean, there's a home field advantage. You've got the familiarity with the stadium. You've got the familiarity, the cheering of the fans and all that kind of stuff. And for this series, it was certainly unprecedented. And I wasn't sure, and I'm glad, Alan, you mentioned it, it never happened before, because I couldn't recall in my memory, World Series where the home team lost every game.
The closest was
advertised
it's
around
never
here.
happened in any major sport.
That was made very clear here in the press.
This was
unique. It was
in 1996 when the Yankees lost the first 2 games to the Braves here in Yankee Stadium. Then they won the 3 in Atlanta, so that's 5 in a row with the road team. Then they came back for the 6 games. Here for the 6th game, and the Yankees won it. But that's as close as they ever got until this one.
Right. All right, well, guys, this has been fun for me. I've enjoyed talking about it, and you guys are all the baseball mavens, as Ralph says, and we all love the game. And for this to happen, I'm excited personally for Washington, and David, I know you are. And it's one of those things. I think it's very good for the game, and with everything that goes on, and it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen in these winter meetings as to what's going to, the players and the kind of free agencies and all the signings and everything that's going to happen as a result. So I'm looking forward to that. And guys, anybody else have anything to talk about?
I just want to say congratulations, George and David, because you guys really deserved it.
Well, thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. Appreciate it. I guess that's it, guys. Yep. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Hal.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.